All right, let's get started. Uh, so, kind of just wanted to give a little outline of what we're going to talk about here, just to give you a sense of what I'm going to cover. Um, I'll go into my background a little bit, just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, and then I'll start off like talking about like what is product management, and um, I like to start off with an analogy, and then we'll kind of give you the TLDR and what it is. The meat of this conversation will be about a day in the life. So, what does it look like to work as a product manager? And then, what do you do and who do you work with on a day to day basis? And then I'll just kind of talk about some of the high level key skills and things I'd prioritize if I was going to go back into product or if I was going to apply for product management. And then I'll leave some time at the end for some like open mic and questions. Um, it'll be fun to just chat and think about or just answer anything that you guys have that's top of mind. Um, okay, so I just wanted to set the stage of like what I think this presentation is and what I don't think it is. What it really is a perspective from my own experience as a PM, like an early career PM too. I've only been doing product for about 3.5 years officially. And it's really also a conversation between you and I about how you can learn to leverage some of the strengths that you have from your own background and put your best foot forward when you're doing and applying for product management. Just want to set the stage really clear. Like, this is not a step by step guide on how to get into Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. Like, I think I don't even know how you get into these companies. And I just know how to put your best foot forward. And so, kind of keep that in mind when we're going through the presentation. Um, we're not talking about product casing. I can give some examples of like what that looks like and maybe a framework to have. I do have a backup slide on that. So if we want to chat about that, we can. And then this really isn't like super deep into like interviews and processes. It's really about like what exactly is product management and who do you work with. Um, and my main takeaway here really is to help you feel educated and inspired to like look at more of what this role is about and whether or not it really fits um, your personality and the things that you're interested in. I don't think product management is for everyone. I do think it's like a great field and it has a lot of cool things you can do, but it can be stressful and it has a lot of uh, stakeholder management that we'll talk about pretty soon. Cool. Okay, so just I have two slides on background. I'm not going to bore you guys too much. I started off my kind of journey at Virginia Tech, and I actually studied mechanical engineering before I got into software. Um, Interestingly, I was actually going to join the Air Force and go down this like military route, but that ended up not working out for me. And the Air Force still had some influence. So I was super interested in aerospace, and so I found my way at Boeing, where they had this rotation program. And at this program, I worked primarily in like the jet engine space, but I primarily worked on creating internal software tools. So that's making like actual software for engineers to use. Um, I software is cool, but I quickly realized I didn't like coding like too deeply. Like, I wanted to talk to other people and I wanted to see larger impact. And so I did some roles in larger project management areas. And so, big airplanes like 777X and 737 worked on managing things. And that's where I got a lot of understanding of how to manage different stakeholders. Um, Pretty cool roles there. And then I got lucky. 2021, I was actually studying for the GMAT and I was going to go full-time MBA at some school wherever I could get in. But there was a big hiring boom in this area and I got lucky and found a job in product management. There's a whole story around how my manager got me hired in terms of like I was not supposed to be there. She was only allowed one hire and I luckily got in squeezed by somehow. And now I work on Windows file experiences. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. And I'm also just like you. I am actually a second year evening MBA student. I was still interested in doing my MBA because I think it's just cool to learn a lot about business. And so, Microsoft offers me the opportunity to do this part-time. And so I took it, and uh, just a student just like you guys. Um, cool. So just to give you a background of like, hey, what is like the end state of like, what do you actually do on a day-to-day basis? Like at the core of it, you end up shipping software, and shipping things that either businesses use or consumers use. And so you'll see there's actually two products that I'm working on here right now, and have shipped already. The first one being the one on the left, which is like this UI inside of your Explorer. And it just tells you the status of like your cloud files and things like that. Seems simple at the face of it, but these things are kind of like a first taste of what many product managers actually work on. They work on small UI or UX that gets shipped, but can have tremendous amount of impact and tremendous amount of value to the company. Uh, this simple thing that just tells you like whether or not your stuff is uploaded correctly, and tells you when you're out of storage, brings in millions of dollars to a company per year, especially a company of scale like Microsoft and Windows. So just kind of interesting to see the impact you can have at some of these larger companies, even in some of the products at a smaller scale. Um, and yeah, on the right, where everyone is doing AI now, and so one of my big features is actually working on search in Windows and bringing uh, AI to your PCs. And so, this is like one of the first, we're calling it like invisible features behind the scenes. We're super excited to get this shipped out with quality. And so if you're looking for a new PC, you can come talk to me. And if you don't like your search, you could also talk to me. I'm more than willing to actually talk and see what we can do to improve it. Okay, cool. So, I like to start off product management. Like, what exactly is it? Is there anyone here that is actually a product manager or has been a product manager? Uh, you could leave it in the chat, or if. Okay, cool. I see a couple hands. Yeah, and so I think everyone has a different perception on what product management really is, but I kind of see it as like you being like the conductor of an orchestra or an ensemble. Uh, you don't actually play any of the instruments, and you basically just lead a group through an artistic piece or piece of music or whatever you want to call it. And so you might have some core competency in, say, like software engineering or in marketing, um, but you don't actually do the work. You're supposed to be influencing these people to help drive this entire team to build something together. And so it's kind of what ultimately product management is, right? Your job is to deliver some business impact. You're responsible for moving some business metric, and you're responsible for marshaling your entire team to solve some kind of customer problem. And so, as you start transitioning through and doing more product management work, you end up doing less of the actual building per se, or hand in the code, or doing data analysis, or running user research. And you're more guiding the team of what to build, giving them clear instructions of like what exactly you want to go and make, and then having good taste around what's actually shippable. Uh, what I've come to find is that product management is really about making tons of different trade-offs in the software. You only have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of resources, and a limited amount of data to make decisions. And so you're always making these trade-offs. And so you have to have some good pattern recognition around what is going to work in market and what's not. And so you'll see, as you get more senior as a product manager, you get better and better product sense, which is effectively better pattern recognition. So that's kind of my take on what a product manager is. But honestly, there's so many resources out there. I think this Lenny's podcast is a pretty good one. It's actually a former, I think, Airbnb product manager that decided to spin up his own podcast because there's nothing like this in the market. So take a look at that. If you want to look at like what casing is about, I think there's this place called Exponent. They can help you learn to case. YouTube is also great, and I guess of course like go try to reach out to some PMs. I saw some people raise their hands here. Like definitely talk to your classmates and see like, hey, is this something that's interesting to me? Okay, so now we're gonna get into the meat. Like, who do you actually work with? What's going on? Like, what does a product manager do on a day to day? And this slide is kind of telling you like, this is what your day to day could potentially look like. You're constantly switching context. You're constantly working with different stakeholders, and you're doing this across a bunch of different partner teams across a company. You're trying to set up objectives that meet everyone's expectations. And then you're also doing this across a bunch of different products at different stages of their life. So you can see like this is actually an example of my real-time calendar on like a normal week. Like I'm working on so many different products, and each of these color codes kind of represents like different areas of products that are in different stages. Some of them are already shipped, some of them are trying to be shipped, some of them are in the ideation phase, and we're just making them. And so as a product manager, you're kind of like working on all these different areas. And as you get more senior, you start going into more like business, kind of organizational level partnerships and strategy meetings, and less on the actual product making itself. But since we're not there yet, like let's just kind of focus on what do you do as like a junior PM is what I'm going to call it, like just someone that's like not an actual manager just yet. You work with all these people, and so I'll go through. We'll walk through this, and I do want to stop at each one. And if anyone wants to jump in, just raise your hand. Especially if you actually have experience in any of these spaces, I think like some of you might have a background in software engineering or data science or marketing. And, the PM ends up working with a lot of these people. And every single person has different contexts. So if you do have experience working in these spaces, like definitely raise your hand or leave some comments in the chat if you want to add to the slides. Okay. So, you know, a big part of being a PM is actually working with a ton of other PMs, especially at big tech. Um, as much as people like to say you're the CEO of your own product, like you're really not. There's so many other PMs that are involved, and they're all having different levels of influence and different levels of context within the company. And so the more senior PMs that you interact with, the more scope they have over a company. So you could think of me being in the File Explorer space, then my manager owning all of File Explorer, and then there's a manager above them that owns Windows, and then there's another manager above them that owns experience into devices. You could see it, and then it goes all the way up to Satya, right? So you have this whole stack of many different product leaders in different spaces that have different context, and they're all trying to move some sort of business metric. So that means moving engagement, moving retention. If I'm OneDrive, maybe that's increasing subscriptions. If I'm Office, that means increasing subscriptions. And so each team has a different objective based off of what their users are doing, based off what their organization is doing. And you're all trying to work together to make something a reality and make impact for your customers. And so, I think like there's an art and a science to working with other PMs. You want to align on a business metric you could all agree on. You want to respect some of the product decisions that other PMs make. They have context in their own space. So, have an idea, have a strong opinion and maybe a recommendation, but also hold it loosely and be okay to disagree and commit to a plan. Because oftentimes someone else has some other ideas or has more context more than you do at your level. And at the end of it, you end up building a lot of things together. So that could be a roadmap, agreeing on what's our phased approach, bringing something to market now, and then thinking about what happens later. Discussing new opportunities like, hey, like what can we do with this organization? Like, here's a new AI organization at Microsoft. Can we do something with them and integrate them into our product? And then, as you get more senior, you end up setting what business metrics there are to move that year and that quarter, and what's the most important for the time frame that you're looking at. So that might mean, like, for us, like, AI is super huge. So what are some of the AI OKRs that we can set? And as like a product leader of like Windows, you might be able to marshal all the other teams within Windows if they're all aligned on this one or two, three different metrics that you decide to push forward. Okay, that's kind of a little bit about PM. The other people you tend to work with are user researchers. I don't know if anyone here is a user researcher, but uh, they're super cool to work with. I mean, I think they know the best practices of how to probe and talk to customers. Um, they usually know the different techniques, like how to conduct a user study, how to make non-biased studies. And then they help you like create different things like surveys or run actual UR. Um, and so together you can run a user research with these customers or with these user researchers. And you can align on what questions you want to ask to make sure that certain things get answered in your digging of uh, of the customer. And you end up getting a lot of insights that change your assumptions of like what you should be building and moving toward. And so that's kind of what this whole stakeholder is all about. Um, some outcomes again are like, might be creating some screening criteria with them. So that's like figuring out what demographic you're going to end up talking to, things like that. And then you might even conduct the UR yourself, either solo or with them. And oftentimes we use some real code and real prototypes to actually test designs. Okay. Uh, yeah, another person to work with, data science. It's actually kind of funny. These Copilot images seem to just want to put post-it notes in all the the pictures here. So you'll see a bunch of people with post-it notes. That's besides the point. The data science team typically has just a ton of mastery over things like processing, evaluating data. And what they really do is they help the product management team focus on high ROI areas. So that's like, where in the funnel are people getting dropped off at? And they help you create dashboards and visualizations to, quite frankly, just tell a better story. And so you're always evaluating whether or not there's glitches in the dashboards. You're working with the data team to build funnels to see where engagement kind of drops off. So like total addressable market, service addressable market, people that are actually engaged, people that are retained and still using your stuff after 28 days. All those kind of things you work with the data team to go ahead and build. And you try to look for insights and construct stories. Like, a PM is always going to be pitching their product and like how much funding they need. And so you need to tell a compelling story around the user's experience and like why there's a problem or there's a gap here that you could take advantage of. Um, uh, yeah, honestly, like, and the data team is super important because as a PM, you're responsible for showing how your team measures impact, incremental impact with whatever feature you build. Everyone's bonus, everyone's pay is based off of the impact you deliver. And so it's kind of your responsibility as the PM to make sure that you can go and ship something in fall and see what metric was moved and how people are using it, just with telemetry and with data. And so you work a lot with the data team to make sure that those things are in place so you can say, hey, yes, we actually did this thing in this amount of time. Okay, little meme. there's lunch, but sometimes you don't have enough time and you work right through lunch. And then you end up talking to software engineers because software engineers tend to wake up later in the day. Um, and at big tech, you kind of work with software engineers and mostly their managers, um, especially even as an ICPM or individual contributor PM. Um, and honestly, I think the software engineering team, especially at least at Microsoft, it could be different at different companies, but the software engineering team is probably your most respected or the most important uh, stakeholder, the ones that you need the most respect from. They're going to be the ones that are writing the code, which means you can't show anything unless some code is written. And as a new PM, you want to make sure that you're actually getting something out the door and actually showing progress and showing management that you can build something and get it in customers' hands with quality and actually solves a problem. Um, and so, I think software engineers want people that can respect their craft. And they also want someone that can advocate for when it comes time to measure impact. So, when it comes to the end of the year and you need to show, hey, this team moved this metric, they're relying on you to help them tell that story. Um, and yeah, so software engineers have ton of experience writing code, and they help you understand the technical debt. They help you understand uh, where their APIs are limited, what APIs need to be built, and they really help you walk through a lot of the technical details. Um, in big tech, I've noticed that product managers don't typically even deal with the deliverables or the tickets or whatever the Jira stuff like inside of the software space. A lot of the engineering managers typically manage that. EMs are responsible for execution, and so are the PMs. But many times they manage like, hey, what are we doing on this week? What are we doing next week? What are we doing next month? And how does it accrue to like the full product that the product manager has determined are the requirements for us. Um, so that's a little bit about that, and you know, I think this is something that's pretty important to kind of talk about is that even as an ICPM, you're going to be working with a lot of uh, like principals, principal architects, engineering managers, folks with a ton of technical background and experience. You're negotiating priority with them, timelines, cost. Uh, it could be kind of daunting for someone that's new to product management and that's new to that kind of space. And so there's a bit of imposter syndrome around, oh my gosh, I got to work with like these people that are super senior. But I think you can also rely on these folks to help you uh, learn the best way to do your own job, and always rely on them for a lot of the technical aspects of the project. You're clearly not going to know all the details and you're not going to tell them how to write the code because they know how to do it. You're going to be working with them to build something together. So I think that's like an important thing to just keep in mind when you work with engineers and engineering managers. Um, yeah, there's also a lot of firefighting when it comes down to when the product is about to go out. And sometimes that just means helping in whatever way you can. So even if something is like maybe not in your job per se in the Rex, sometimes you just got to make things happen. And that's your job is to get something out the door. And the PM is responsible for making that happen. Okay. This is probably one of my favorite people to work with, mostly because I like design and I like UI and UX. Um, but the designers are the folks that are masters of creating UI and user experiences. So whatever you see on like a website or an app or even in Windows, like there's folks that have design majors and experience building and creating simple technology design. And so nowadays they also have lots of experience with user research. So they can help you with user research as well. But you primarily partner with these folks to build roadmaps. So that's like a roadmap on what are we going to build now? So crawl, what can we build in the future? And then what are we building in our North Star that kind of accrues to it? Um, uh, you know, not every feature is going to make it to what you ship because you need to ship something in a short amount of time. And so engineering can't build everything, design wants everything. PM's kind of like in this middle ground of like trying to help make sure that the business goal is met within that time frame and that you build an experience that is worthy, that solves people's problems, but is also achievable. So the engineering team can actually finish it in the time frame you have with quality. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about that. Let's see. Yeah, they help you. They also, I think it's also good to rely on some of the better designers. Kind of know that engineering has a lot of trade-offs, or has to make a lot of trade-offs, and so they'll help you recommend what the ideal user experience is, like the North Star is what we like to call it. So if we had no money or had unlimited money, what would we go build? And then you work with the design team to walk it back and say, okay, what's actually achievable at this time frame? You'll be surprised, like big companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they're actually quite limited in the amount of people they have for the amount of impact that they can have, as in like number of users. And so we're always actually prioritizing and thinking about what are we going to get the best bang for our buck and in the shortest amount of time we have. Okay. Another stakeholder you're working with is marketing. I don't know if anyone here has a marketing background, but I think marketing really helps with product management because there's a lot of concepts that are overlapping in terms of segmentation, targeting, and positioning, which again, these are things you will probably, if you're a first year, you'll probably be learning in the new in your core classes soon. But these are important things that are actually applicable in product management. And occasionally you end up using these techniques to tell some kind of story or create some pitch deck and say, here's the type of customer we're going after, and here's the persona around them and all that stuff. For some companies, for some products, pricing is pretty important. So like, what are our subscription tiers, or how do we gotta price this against our competitors? And so you end up working with the marketing team to figure out like how exactly you're gonna go and price this thing. Another, really cool thing about some of the big tech companies is we get to talk to the press. Like I showed you an article from The Verge, um, and there was documents that I wrote to help tell the story to the customers, and we had actual marketing folks that go out and have like computers out and they do demos and um, I'm sure you even see Apple, like they have the circle, what is it, the HQ, and they have people come through. Like we have very similar things like that, and the product teams are actually the ones like helping craft the story of here's this really complicated feature we have that we're going to ship, and here's all the technical details, and then here's how we think you should sell it to people. And then the marketing team will take their pass and like try to sell it in a better, more compelling way that makes sense to customers, makes sense to the world, and is kind of relevant uh, to the climate and the situation that's happening at that time. Um, cool. And as you get more seniors, you get more high up, you might end up running a product demo yourself. I know quite a few principal like product managers end up going and flying out to New York or to LA or wherever these conferences are, and they go and they run these product demos for people live and things like that. Okay, so come to the end of the day, like you've talked to like you've talked to data science, you've talked to the engineers and everyone, and now you're like, what do you do? You ultimately are collecting all these inputs from everyone, and you're adapting the context, and you're you're really prioritizing what's gonna fit in the time frame that I have, and let's build some kind of way or spec or document, could even be a notion of what we're actually gonna go build. And you kind of write all this stuff down. You talk about, here are the customers we're going after. Here's what's going on in the business. Here are competitors that and what they're doing in this space. And then you say, here's my idea. This is what we're going to go build, with the context of everyone else and with the help of all the other PMs and designers and everything like that. And then these specs get really, really detailed. You go down to as a user, I want this feature and blah, blah, blah. And you prioritize like exactly what you're going to create, so that the team has ultimately clarity on what they're going to go code and what they're going to build in dashboards, so that you can measure success in the future. A lot of, and I think you do learn this in marketing too, a lot of um, product management is based off of, or just any building anything software and tech is based off of like this hypothesis testing theory, which is like, you come in with an assumption like, if I introduce this feature, then it's gonna improve this business metric by XYZ% because it's gonna help people do Y. And so you come in with this idea of like, how do I test this thing almost like a scientist, and see if it actually works. And if it doesn't work, then you scrap it or you iterate and you change. But that's ultimately kind of what your end goal is to get something out and then evaluate whether or not it worked well. Um, and yeah, lastly, there's a lot of firefighting too. So sometimes you just got to do whatever is necessary to get things out the door. And I think it's important to bias for action. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap it up right here because I think we're getting close to my time. But here's just some takeaways of things that I think are important for being successful in product management, or even uh, maybe even your career. Some things you could take away, and they're not necessarily like technical skills, right? They're really about some of the things like core competencies. Like, there's no instruction manual on how to be a good PM. You kind of have to figure it out on your own, and you kind of have to have that get shit done attitude and just go out there and be okay with not knowing the answers and finding out what the answers are. Your manager might just go tell you to go build something in this space, and it's up to you to decide what that looks like and how that fits the capabilities of what your team can deliver. So I really recommend thinking about prioritization and prioritizing impact. There's some frameworks online, but finding something that works for you is the most important thing. Tons of stuff on the internet. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's not all that useful. So you have to kind of experiment on your own to figure out uh, which frameworks work. I talk about it. Continuous learning is important. Like, you're really a master of none of these different stakeholders. Like, software engineers are probably going to be better at developing things than you, and designers are be better at designing things. So there's always something to learn and something to take away from these people and from resources online. So just keep up to date. And that could be, A/B testing, or, your MBA is actually a great place to learn some of the core skills that'll help you give ideas of how these different teams and people interact. And then the last thing here, it's kind of a little more soft, but being competent and still confident. Uh, I talked a lot about all these different areas. In some way, you've probably done some of those things at your job already. So double down on the strengths and the places that um, that you're good at, and because that's ultimately what really matters. And when you go to these interviews, you want to show that you're doing the job of a PM now, and relate that to your entire story. So, be as genuine as possible. Don't make stuff up, but I think you want to show hiring managers and people that you're actually doing the job of a product manager, and it's low risk for them to hire you. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your stories and thinking about product management. I think there's so many different skills and so many different areas and so many different things you can choose to like bring up. in your interviews. Just really focus on where you think your strengths are, because that's ultimately going to show in the process. Okay, so we got to the end of this. Just gonna leave the floor open.